With less than 2 weeks to go until the midterms, a federal judge in Georgia is ruling to temporarily block the state's signature match voting law. Under the law, absentee ballots can be rejected if a voter's signature doesn't actually match the one that the state has on file. Georgia election officials now cannot throw out these ballots without giving voters a chance to actually confirm their identity. A federal judge agreed with the ACLU's argument that allowing non-expert officials to actually judge the validity of signatures amounted to unconstitutional voter suppression. Well, the rights of voters in Georgia have been under a microscope during the state's governor's election. That's because the Republican nominee, Brian Kemp, is also Georgia's Secretary of State, meaning he's actually the top official overseeing the race that he's actually participating in. Well, joining me now from Atlanta is WGCL-TV political reporter Giovanna Drpic. Giovanna, thank you very much, first off, for joining us. Well, tell us
Thank you for having me.
A little bit about this investigation. What's really going on with these signatures and this matching rule?
This is important because Stacey Abrams has made a big deal about Brian Kemp, her opponent, being, if you will, the king of voter suppression in Georgia. This is a constant campaign talking point. He vehemently denies it. He says that he is simply following the law and he's preventing voter fraud. Now, the reason why this is important is because there was a group, the judge sided with a Muslim group and an Asian American group who said, wait a minute, you rejected our absentee ballots, absentee ballot applications because of a mismatched signature. Brian Kemp said, this is a minuscule amount compared to all of the voters, and if you make us revisit this topic, well, that's just going to be an administrative nightmare. The judge sided with the Asian American group and sided with the Muslim group and said, no, you have to actually take a look at those, notify these voters, give them a chance to prove that their signatures do match. And she also pointed out that Brian Kemp and other election officials could not argue that it's a tiny amount and then say it would be an administrative burden, that one doesn't equal the other.
So, Giovanna, give me a little sense about this sort of Brian Kemp, the accusations about voter suppression that are against this Republican nominee. What's really driving that?
This is something that a lot of groups have been talking about, trying to give proof of, and we've seen a lot of lawsuits regarding this. For example, the NAACP was talking about voting irregularities. We did a story on that where they were claiming that the machines weren't, one person would mark one candidate and it would show up as another. The person we spoke with, the election supervisor in one county, said, well, no, it's not that the machine is changing the vote or anything. It's just that these machines are old. They're from 2002. They need to be recalibrated in some cases. And if we don't find out about them, then we don't have a chance to recalibrate it. It could also be a function of height. If a person's too tall or too short, it may look like they're pressing something, but that's not the case. They're pressing it for another person. We also spoke with another woman who in Jefferson County, she's with Black Voters Matter, and they did a presentation at this rec center for seniors. And they did this presentation. The seniors were all excited. They said, hey, can we board this bus to early vote? They got about 40 seniors up there, and then suddenly they were told the event had to end. So you hear these accusations. Why are they stopping voters from voting, early voting? In particular, these were senior citizens who are African American. The county administrator had said, no, that wasn't the case. We don't allow political activities during business hours. This was headed up by somebody who was the Democratic head of the county there. So that didn't work, and we were uncomfortable having seniors going on this third-party bus. So they said that, you know, this is why we did not allow it. Of course, they said this was an unwritten rule. And when you have an unwritten rule, of course, that's up for interpretation.
Yeah, it certainly is. You look at how tight this race is. I think it's within 2 points. Could this issue of voter registration, absentee ballots, actually really be making the difference in who actually wins the race?
At this point, yes, of course, everything changes. I would say in the last month or so, we've had 3 or 4 or 5 polls, and each one, it's a dead heat. So anything could make a difference here. And here's what people aren't realizing. 2 things. One, this means that despite what the candidates are doing, those ads, all the money that's being poured into this race and so forth, it's not moving the needle. So what's going to move the needle in one candidate's direction or another in the last 2 weeks? Plus, in Georgia, to win an election outright, you have to win by 50% plus one. In all of these polls, if you believe them, they haven't gotten that. So that means that November 7th, the day after the midterms, we'll still be talking about this and we'll be going on to the next round, the runoff, December 4th.
December 4th, interesting. You know, the New York Times unearthed a 1992 article, this actually came from the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, that placed Stacey Abrams at a rally where the Georgia state flag was being burned. The Georgia flag at the time did include a Confederate battle flag design. What are both sides, Kemp and Abrams, saying about this?
Well, first off, they don't call them October surprises for nothing. This happened with less than 24 hours to the debate, the eve of the debate. So this came out, she was a college freshman, and she came out even on the debate stage and said, look, it was a peaceful, permitted protest. And my opponent, she said, Brian Kemp actually agreed with me because 10 years later, that Georgia flag, it was changed and that Confederate emblem was removed. There was some question about whether she actually burned the flag by participating at this protest. She participated in the protest, but we actually had a guest on who was one of the leaders who said she actually did not burn the flag. Does that make a difference to some people? Perhaps, perhaps not. Of course, lunchtime, the day of the debate, there was another leak, another October surprise. Rolling Stone came out with this audio recording from this campaign event where Brian Kemp apparently was heard saying that he was concerned about Stacey Abrams' get out the vote efforts and that this was an unprecedented number of people who were early voting, and this was of concern to him if people actually did go out and exercise their right to vote. So of course some people said, there you go, that's voter suppression. Others say he didn't say that.
A lot to digest, and we've only got 2 more weeks left until
every day.
Every day, Giovanna. So grateful you can give us an update. A lot happening in Georgia. Giovanna Drpic, thanks again for joining us.